My name is Constance, and I am 61 years old. For 40 years, I believed my life was a masterpiece of my own design. I was the matriarch of the esteemed Blackwood family, wife to the brilliant architect Percival, mother to our devoted son Theodore, and the steady hand that guided our family's legacy. When my sweet daughter-in-law Penelope gave birth to twin boys after years of heartbreaking struggle, I thought my masterpiece was finally complete, the perfect final brushstroke. I stood in the sterile hospital room, gazing at the two perfect babies, and my heart felt so full it might burst. Then the doctor came in with the paternity test results I had secretly ordered, and with a few quiet words, he took a sledgehammer to my life's work. The masterpiece was a forgery. One of the twins was my son's, the other was my husband's. If you're enjoying this story, drop a comment about where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button to join our storytelling family for more real-life drama that will make you question everything. Before my world imploded, it was a world of quiet elegance and ordered beauty. Percival and I had built Blackwood and Associates from a two-person operation in our spare bedroom into the most respected architectural firm in the state. He was the visionary, the artist who could sketch skylines on a napkin. I was the pragmatist, the one who managed the finances, nurtured client relationships, and turned his brilliant sketches into profitable realities. We were a perfect team in business and in life. Our marriage was the bedrock of my existence. 40 years of shared dreams, inside jokes, and a deep, comfortable intimacy I thought was unbreakable. Our son Theodore was our greatest achievement. He was a kind, gentle soul, with his father's talent but my steady temperament. He'd followed his father into the firm, a capable and loyal second-in-command, content to support his father's vision. My heart swelled with pride every time I saw them side by side, two generations of Blackwood men building a legacy. Then came Penelope. She entered our lives like a soft spring breeze. She was an art history graduate who worked at a local gallery, and Theodore was utterly smitten from their first meeting. At first, I was cautious. Theodore had his heart broken in college, and I was fiercely protective. But Penelope was impossible not to love. She was sweet, attentive, and seemed to worship the ground Theodore walked on. She showed a deep interest in our family history. She praised my business acumen, and she treated Percival with a daughterly reverence that he soaked up like the sun. She fit into our family so perfectly, it felt like she had been designed to fill a space we didn't even know was empty. Their only sadness was their struggle to conceive. For 5 years, they navigated the painful, expensive world of fertility treatments. There were failed cycles, devastating disappointments, and quiet tears. Through it all, I was their rock. I held Penelope's hand during difficult appointments. I listened to Theodore's late-night fears, and I assured them both that they would one day have the family they so desperately wanted. When they finally announced that Penelope was pregnant, with twins no less, it felt like a miracle, a collective victory for the entire family. The pregnancy was a joyous time. I doted on Penelope, ensuring that she had everything she needed. Percival was unusually attentive, often stopping by their home with rare books on art or playing classical music for her, claiming it was for the baby's cognitive development. It was sweet, I thought, a grandfather-to-be embracing his new role with his typical intellectual flair. Theodore was in a state of constant, blissful anticipation, renovating their home, building cribs, and reading every parenting book he could get his hands on. I felt a deep sense of peace. My family was thriving, my son was happy, and the Blackwood legacy was secure for another generation. I didn't know that I was living in a beautifully constructed lie and that the woman I had welcomed as a daughter was the architect of my life's greatest betrayal.
The twins, Henry and Alexander, were born on a crisp autumn morning. They were beautiful, healthy, and a perfect blend of our family's features. The hospital room was filled with flowers and laughter. Theodore was a natural father, his face transformed by a love so pure it was breathtaking. Percival was the proud patriarch, accepting congratulations and speaking eloquently about the continuity of family. Penelope was the glowing mother, the heroine who had finally delivered our miracle. But as the initial euphoria settled, I began to notice small, dissonant details. Henry was the spitting image of Theodore at that age. The same dark, curly hair, the same quiet, watchful eyes. Alexander, however, was different. He had a shock of blonde hair, just like Percival's as a young man, and a distinctively shaped mouth that I recognized from my husband's baby photos. It was an uncanny resemblance. "He looks just like you, Percy," I had remarked to my husband as he held Alexander. A strange, unreadable expression flickered across his face before he smiled. "All babies look like wrinkled old men, my dear. He'll find his own face in time." I dismissed it as a grandmother's overactive imagination. Genetics were a funny thing after all. But the oddities continued when they came home. Penelope, who had always been so deferential to me, seemed to subtly shift her allegiance. She would ask for my advice on feeding schedules, only to later disregard it in favor of a suggestion Percival had made. She started dressing in a style that was more mature, more aligned with my own classic tastes, a change Percival praised enthusiastically. "You see, Constance," he would say, "Penelope has true elegance, a rare quality these days." His compliments felt less like praise for her and more like a subtle critique of me. Then there was his behavior with the twins. He was a doting grandfather to both, but there was a possessiveness in the way he held Alexander that felt different. He would gaze at him for stretches, a look of intense, proprietary pride on his face. "This one has the Blackwood fire," he declared one afternoon as Alexander let out a powerful cry. "He's a true builder. I can feel it." Theodore, bless his heart, saw none of it. He was so deeply in love with his new family that he was blind to the subtle currents shifting beneath the surface. When I gently mentioned that Penelope seemed to be leaning on Percival a lot, he just smiled. "Isn't it great?" he'd said. "I'm so glad she feels close to him. I always worried Dad would be a distant grandfather, but he's been amazing." I felt a growing sense of isolation. Was I imagining things? Was I becoming a jealous, overbearing mother-in-law? I tried to push my suspicions down, telling myself it was just the stress of the new arrivals changing the family dynamic. The moment of sickening clarity came 3 months after the twins were born. It was Percival's 65th birthday. Penelope had insisted on throwing him a lavish surprise party at their home. During the party, I watched as Penelope presented Percival with his gift. It was a beautiful vintage gold locket. "So you can always keep your legacy close to your heart," she'd said, her voice full of emotion as she helped him fasten it around his neck. Later that evening, after most of the guests had left, I saw the locket lying on an end table where Percival had taken it off. Curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up. The engraving on the back was tiny but clear. P plus P, forever. My heart began to pound. With trembling fingers, I opened the clasp. Inside, on one side, was a professionally taken miniature portrait of Penelope. On the other was not a picture of his grandchildren, or his son, or even me, his wife of 40 years. It was a picture of Percival himself. I felt the air leave my lungs. This wasn't a gift from a loving daughter-in-law to her father-in-law. This was a gift from a lover. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying speed. Penelope's sudden shift in style. Percival's possessiveness of Alexander. The uncanny resemblance. It was all there. I stumbled into their guest bathroom, my reflection in the mirror a mask of disbelief and horror. The affair was one thing, a devastating betrayal on its own. But then a much darker possibility began to form in my mind. A thought so monstrous I could barely let myself think it. Alexander. What if Alexander wasn't just his grandson? What if he was his son? The thought was a physical blow. I felt a wave of nausea and gripped the sink for support. I had to know. I had to know the truth, no matter how ugly it was. Getting the DNA samples was a nauseating exercise in subterfuge. I felt like a criminal in my own family. I told Theodore and Penelope that a friend of mine worked at a cutting-edge genetics lab that was offering complimentary ancestry and health screening panels for newborns. "It's amazing, Penelope," I said, my voice a carefully constructed imitation of cheerful interest. "They can screen for all sorts of potential health issues. It would give us all such peace of mind." Penelope was hesitant, her eyes darting towards the hallway as if expecting Percival to appear and advise her. But Theodore, ever practical and concerned for his children's well-being, jumped at the idea. "That's fantastic, Mom. Let's absolutely do it." The kit arrived a week later. It required simple cheek swabs. I collected the samples from the babies myself, my hands shaking as I gently swabbed the inside of their tiny mouths. The next part was harder. I needed a sample from Percival. I managed it under the guise of helping him with a difficult bit of food stuck in his teeth, using a dental pick I'd sterilized and then carefully preserved. It felt like a scene from a spy movie. Absurd and terrifying. The lie I told the lab was simple. I said the samples were from a single mother with twins who wanted to confirm paternity between two potential fathers. Dr. Bellwether, my own physician for 20 years, was the one who recommended the lab. I had confessed my fears to her in a tearful private appointment. She was the only person in the world who knew what I was doing. She didn't judge, she just listened, her expression a mixture of sympathy and professional gravity, and promised to help interpret the results when they came. The 2-week waiting period was the longest of my life. I went through the motions of my days in a fog. I attended meetings at the firm, I had dinners with friends, I played with my grandchildren, all while this monstrous secret coiled in my gut. Every interaction with Percival was excruciating. I saw him through new eyes. His charming compliments felt like manipulations. His affectionate touches felt like violations. I watched him with Penelope, noting the secret glances, the brief possessive touches on her arm that I had previously overlooked. The betrayal was so audacious, so complete, that I sometimes wondered if I was losing my mind. Theodore remained blissfully unaware. He would talk for hours about his sons, about his plans for their future, about how happy he was. "I finally have everything I've ever wanted, Mom," he told me one night, his face glowing with a pure, unadulterated joy that felt like a knife in my heart. How could I tell him that his perfect family was a lie, that his wife had betrayed him with his own father, that one of the sons he adored might not even be his? The thought of destroying his happiness was almost as painful as the betrayal. My confidant during this time was my oldest friend, Agnes. She was a retired history professor, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had seen me through every crisis in my life. I told her everything. She didn't offer easy platitudes. "So the question is not just what is the truth," she said over a glass of wine in her book-filled study. "The question is what you intend to do with it. The truth can be a weapon, Constance. You must decide if you are using it to heal a wound or to burn the whole house down." Her words stayed with me.
What did I want? I wanted the lie to stop. I wanted accountability. But I also wanted to protect Theodore and the innocent children caught in the middle of this toxic mess. The email from the lab arrived on a Wednesday morning. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked it open. The subject line was clinical: paternity analysis results for case number 734. I downloaded the attached PDF. It was a series of charts and percentages, cold scientific data that held the power to detonate my world. I scanned the document, my eyes searching for the conclusion, and then I saw it. Conclusion: the alleged father, designated Father A, Theodore, is determined to be the biological father of child A, Henry, with a probability of 99.999%. The alleged father, Father A, Theodore, is conclusively excluded as the biological father of child B, Alexander. The alleged father, designated Father B, Percival, is determined to be the biological father of child B with a probability of 99.999%. I read it again and again. The words didn't change. It was true. All of it. The uncanny resemblance, the possessiveness, the locket. It was all true. Alexander was my husband's son. My grandson was my stepson. My son was raising his own half-brother. I leaned forward and was quietly, violently sick into my wastebasket. After the nausea passed, a strange, chilling calm descended. The uncertainty was gone. The doubt, the fear of being wrong, the gaslighting, it was all gone. All that was left was the cold, hard, and utterly unforgivable truth. Agnes was right. The truth was a weapon, and I knew with absolute certainty that I was about to burn the whole house down. The plan for the revelation had to be perfect. A private confrontation would allow them to lie, to manipulate, to gaslight me. A public accusation would be unseemly and could harm the firm. I needed a setting that was both private and inescapable, a stage for the final act of our family's tragedy. The twins' christening was in 2 weeks. It was perfect. A celebration of family, legacy, and faith, the very things they had desecrated. It would be held at our home with only our closest family and a few old friends in attendance. There would be no escape. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing for battle. I met with my lawyer, Mr. Hawthorne, a shrewd, discreet man who had handled our firm's legal affairs for years. I didn't tell him the whole truth, not yet. I simply told him that I was anticipating a significant marital dispute and needed to understand my position regarding the firm and our personal assets. He drew up the necessary documents for a potential separation, outlining how our shared assets, including our 50-50 partnership in Blackwood and Associates, would be divided. The documents sat in my briefcase, a silent promise of a future I was now planning for. I also met with Agnes. Together, we crafted the perfect, symbolic gifts for the christening. For Henry, my true grandson, I found a beautiful leather-bound first edition of The Velveteen Rabbit, the same book Theodore had adored as a child. Inside the cover, I wrote a simple inscription: "To my dearest grandson Henry, may you always know you are loved for exactly who you are. All my love, Grandma." For Alexander, the gift was more complex, a double-edged sword. I went to the family's safe deposit box and retrieved a small silver compass that had belonged to Percival's own grandfather, a man he had revered. It was a priceless family heirloom, something Percival had always said he was saving for his true heir. I had it cleaned and polished, and I placed it in a velvet box. The attached card was simple and devastatingly ambiguous. For Alexander, so you may find your way back to your true north. C.
The day of the christening was beautiful and sunny, a cruel juxtaposition to the storm that was about to break. Our home was filled with white flowers. Penelope was radiant in a pale blue dress, playing the part of the perfect mother. Percival was the proud patriarch, holding court, accepting congratulations. Theodore was a nervous, happy father, his love for his sons shining from his face. My heart ached for him. This would be the last day of his innocence. The ceremony at the church was a blur. I sat in the front pew, an automaton going through the motions. When we returned to the house for the reception, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a play. I waited until everyone had a glass of champagne in their hands for the toast. Percival stood, tapping his glass for attention. He began a long, eloquent speech about family, legacy, and the joy of seeing the Blackwood name carried on. It was a masterful performance, and it made my stomach turn. When he finished, everyone applauded. Then I stood up. "I'd like to say a few words as well," I said, my voice clear and steady in the sudden silence. All eyes turned to me. I raised my glass. I would like to toast to the truth, because in families, as in architecture, a structure built on a faulty foundation will inevitably collapse. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Percival shot me a warning look. I ignored him. "I have gifts for my grandsons," I said, moving towards the gift table. I handed the wrapped book to Theodore. "For Henry, this was always your favorite." He smiled, his eyes shining. "Thanks, Mom." Then I turned and handed the small velvet box to Percival. "And for Alexander, I believe this belongs to his, paternal line." Percival took the box, a slight frown on his face. He opened it. I saw his eyes widen as he recognized the compass. He looked at me, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. Penelope, standing beside him, went pale. "What is this, Constance?" Percival asked me, his voice low. "It's a compass," I said loudly enough for the whole room to hear. "A family heirloom for a man to pass on to his son." Theodore looked between us, his happy expression faltering. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I took a deep breath. This was it. "I'm talking about the paternity, Theodore. I'm talking about the fact that this family, this beautiful legacy we are celebrating today, is built on a lie." I pulled a folder from my briefcase. "I had a DNA test done, for health screening purposes, I told you, but it seems it revealed something else entirely." I looked directly at my son, my heart breaking for the pain I was about to cause him. "Theodore, Henry is your son, and I love him with all my heart." Then I turned my gaze to my husband and his mistress. "But Alexander is not. He is Percival's son." The collective gasp in the room was a physical thing. Theodore stared at me, his face ashen, his mind clearly unable to process my words. That's not possible," he stammered. "Oh, but it is," I said, my voice like ice. I slid the DNA results across the polished dining room table. They landed in front of Penelope. "She was never infertile, Theodore. She just didn't want to spoil her figure with a pregnancy. And your father, so obsessed with his own legacy, was more than happy to provide a direct heir." Penelope let out a choked sob. Percival's face was a thunderous mask of rage. "You have lost your mind, Constance. This is a hysterical, jealous fantasy." "Is it?" I asked, turning to Penelope. "Then perhaps you can explain the locket you gave him for his birthday, the one engraved P+P forever, or the secret trips you took together, which, by the way, are all documented here." I dropped a second folder on the table, this one filled with copies of hotel receipts and credit card statements I had found. Theodore looked from the DNA report
to the locket now visible on his father's chest, to Penelope's crumbling face. And in that moment, he knew. The sound he made was not a word, but a raw animal cry of pure agony. It was the sound of a man's world being utterly destroyed. The aftermath was chaos. Theodore lunged not at his father, but at the wall, his fist connecting with the blaster with a sickening crack. He sank to his knees, his shoulders shaking with racking sobs. Agnes immediately went to him, shielding him from the horrified stares of our guests. My brother, who had been standing in shocked silence, began ushering the guests out, his voice a low, urgent murmur. I think it's time for everyone to go. Percival and Penelope were frozen, their faces masks of public humiliation. How could you do this? Percival hissed at me, his voice trembling with rage. In front of everyone? You have destroyed this family. No, I replied, my own voice shaking but firm. You two destroyed this family when you betrayed my son in the most despicable way imaginable. I am simply turning on the lights so we can all see the wreckage. Penelope, finally finding her voice, turned on Theodore. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she cried, a bizarre and self-pitying wail. We were going to tell you, eventually. We were going to be a modern family. Theodore looked up from the floor, his face streaked with tears, his eyes filled with a pain so profound it was terrifying to witness. Get out, he whispered, his voice broken. Theodore, please, get out, he roared, struggling to his feet. He picked up his son Henry from the playpen where he had been sleeping, holding him to his chest like a shield. Take my son and get out of my parents' house. His focus was entirely on Penelope. He couldn't even look at his father. I stepped forward. Actually, Theodore, this is no longer your father's house either. I turned to Percival. Mr. Hawthorne will be serving you with divorce papers tomorrow morning. I am dissolving our partnership in the firm, and I am filing for sole ownership of this house, which, as you know, was purchased with funds from my family's inheritance, not yours. Percival stared at me, finally understanding the full scope of my counterattack. I wasn't just exposing the affair, I was dismantling our entire life. You can't do that. The firm is half mine. The firm was built on my capital and my management, Percy. You were the talent. I was the foundation. And you have just dynamited the foundation. We'll let the courts decide what's left for you. Now take your son and your mistress and leave my home. The fight seemed to drain out of him. He looked old, defeated. He walked over to the playpen and picked up a crying Alexander. Penelope followed him, her face a mess of tears and ruined makeup. They walked out the front door without another word. The silence they left behind was vast and echoing. The weeks that followed were a blur of lawyers and logistics. Theodore and Henry moved in with me. My son was a ghost, walking through the rooms of our house, his eyes hollow. He barely spoke. He focused all his energy on caring for Henry, a tiny, innocent anchor in his sea of grief. I took over, handling everything else. I met with Mr. Hawthorne daily, methodically untangling my life from Percival's. The legal battle was brutal. Percival, spurred on by Penelope, fought me on everything. The house, the firm, our investments. They tried to paint me as an unstable, vindictive woman, but the evidence was irrefutable. The DNA test, the financial records of their affair, the testimony of a few loyal employees at the firm who had witnessed their inappropriate behavior. It was all there.
The most painful part was the division of the firm.
Many of our employees and clients were forced to choose sides. Most, to my profound gratitude, chose to stay with me and Theodore. They had seen Percival's growing arrogance and Penelope's manipulative influence for what it was. Theodore, after a month of numb grief, slowly began to re-engage. The betrayal had shattered his innocence, but it had also forged something new in him, a quiet, steely resolve. He came with me to the legal meetings, he spoke with clients, and he began to design again, his work imbued with a new depth and maturity. He was no longer his father's shadow, he was becoming his own man. We established a new firm, Blackwood and Son. It felt right, a new beginning built on the ashes of the old. We moved to a smaller, more modern office space, leaving the opulent headquarters that Percival had designed behind. We focused on smaller, more meaningful projects, community centers, libraries, affordable housing. We were building something new, something honest. Percival and Penelope's life, from what I heard through the grapevine, was the opposite. He lost the house and the majority of the firm's assets. His reputation was in tatters. No one wanted to work with the brilliant architect who had betrayed his own son. They moved into a small, modern condo Penelope had purchased with her family's money. She had gotten what she wanted, Percival, but she had lost the status, the wealth, and the family she had worked so hard to infiltrate, and she was now the sole parent to a child whose existence was a constant reminder of their shared betrayal. They were trapped together in a gilded cage of their own making. 1 year after the christening, Theodore and I were on the site of our first major project, a children's library for a low-income neighborhood. He was sketching on a notepad, his face animated, his eyes clear for the first time in months. Henry was playing nearby, a happy, healthy toddler. "You know, Mom," he said, not looking up from his sketch, "for a long time I thought Dad was the strong one, the foundation. But I was wrong. It was you. You were the one holding everything up all along." I felt tears well in my eyes, but for the first time in a very long time, they were not tears of sadness. "We're the foundation now, Theo," I replied, putting my arm around his shoulders. "We're building something that will last." He smiled, a true, genuine smile. "Yeah, Mom, we are." Looking at the steel beams rising against the blue sky, I knew he was right. I had lost the life I thought I had, the husband I thought I knew, the family I thought was perfect. The wreckage was immense. But from the ruins, my son and I were building something stronger, something truer, something real. And it was a masterpiece. Have you ever had to make a choice that you knew would destroy your family in order to save yourself or someone you love? What does the word legacy truly mean? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of betrayal and rebirth resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming life's greatest challenges. Remember, sometimes you have to tear everything down to build something beautiful and true. Thank you for listening.